everybody. We're just gonna wait a couple minutes till we get more people. But in the meantime, live captioning is available. You can click on the CC button and the show subtitle on the bottom of the screen. There's also a separate link that you can open on a separate device. You can please keep yourself muted until you speak. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end where everybody can interact and chat and tell us what you've been working on. If you're having technical challenges, indicate so and a team member will offer support. And please tell us who you are, say hello in the chat, and let us know where you're coming from. We're all excited to see you here. And I'm just gonna go down and see who's here. Looking at the list of people, I can't see anyone. Lots of people off camera, which is totally fine. I would love to at some point take a picture of everyone on this Zoom screen when we stop sharing. If you don't mind, if you don't want to be in that picture, just turn your camera off. That's totally fine. All right, there's a couple more people in the waiting room. I think we will go ahead and get started. I'm going to leave this on until people come in and get oriented. So the Consortium Connection, welcome everyone to the Consortium Connection sharing lead and AZA takeaways. Really excited to see you all here. There's captioning available. You can click on the live transcript and show subtitle or open up another screen with the link that you see on the stream text link. And all of the bios have been sent to you in advance so that you know who is going to be speaking. And we will go to the next slide now. Today we're going to be sharing takeaways from the LEAD conference and the AZA conference. And I'm Elizabeth Ralston, and I am a white woman with short wavy silver hair. And I'm wearing a blue shirt with paisley markings on it with a red sweater because it's a little chilly for the first time in a while. And I'm the founder of the Seattle Cultural Accessibility Consortium, and our mission is to connect arts and cultural organizations with information and resources to improve accessibility for people of all abilities. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We feel that it's really important to honor the land that we live, work, and play, and the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we are on. And we have compiled some resources that you can check out at your leisure. So we're going to set the stage. Every time we have one of these gatherings, we really want to make this a safe and brave space for people to participate. We respectfully request that everyone research and share resources proactively in an effort to broaden our collective knowledge. There's so much wisdom in this room, and I hope you won't hesitate to share that in the chat. We'll come off mute when it's appropriate at the end when we have a discussion and answer questions. Refrain from judgment. Speak your truth while knowing the truth of others may be different. Approach with openness and curiosity. Recognize privilege in yourself and others, and accept that each person and organization operates at varying levels of accomplishment. Listen and pause to understand before responding. Take responsibility for your contributions. Acknowledge that today's conversation may reveal bravery and also spark discomfort. Gestures of kindness and offers of assistance are strongly encouraged. So the overview, we're going to talk about what we have each learned from these conferences that we have attended. And at the end, we will open up for Q&A. Because we have so much to share, there's not going to be a lot of time to go into breakout rooms, but we have a nice, cozy group here. I think we'll have a great discussion. Our goals for all the connections are to create a space where people can network and learn from each other about accessibility and take your ideas back to your organization and start to implement them. Remember, we want to strive for progress, not perfection. We want to come away with new connections and perspectives and ideas for building inclusive opportunities for artists, colleagues, and anyone who is involved in accessibility and the arts. I want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be here today. Seattle Theater Group, Seattle Foundation, Pacific Northwest Ballet, the Office of Arts and Culture from the City of Seattle, Arts Washington. Thank you all so much for helping us to keep the accessibility conversation elevated. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maura Tamayo, who will introduce herself and talk about LEAD and her learnings.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Moira Tamayo. I am a Hispanic woman with brown grain hair. I wear glasses, and I am wearing a blue t-shirt and a striped blue and white jacket. Thank you for this opportunity. Attending the LEAD conference was really important for me and made a lot of difference in my life and my work. What is LEAD? LEAD is part of Kennedy Center's VSA International Network. It stands for Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability. I am the Senior Marketing Manager for the Seattle Aquarium, and this is what the LEAD team calls Living Collections. The Seattle Aquarium, like Woodland Park Zoo, is a nonprofit organization. So we fall under this umbrella of LEAD. The objective of LEAD is to advance the full inclusion of people with disabilities in art and culture, with a focus on expanding the breadth and scope of accessible programming. LEAD provides an opportunity for professionals in the field to develop best practices, engage in conversations with colleagues and experts from around the world, and learn practical methods for designing inclusive arts and museum experiences and environments. I should mention that the learning and the dialogue continues after the conference. Once you attend the conference, you are a member of VSA, and people ask for help, share experiences, and there is a very active online community. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so these are some of the people that attend LEAD. Pretty much everybody, because we are all involved in community. I myself work in marketing, but we have interdepartmental group working on DEI and accessibility initiatives, and that is because it touches all of us. So whether you work on the disability, whether that is part of your job title, you are part of a DEIA organization, you work in outreach and education, box office, visitor engagement, sales, front of house, back of house, facilities, human resources, or general management. I think that knowing a little more about LEAD and how to make your space more inclusive is important for everyone. Next. Okay, the conference was in Raleigh, North Carolina this year. Next year, it will be in Boston. It would be really, really awesome if we could bring it to Seattle. So let's try to make that happen by sharing our best practices and by expanding our accessibility focus. All right. Like I said, this was my first experience with this topic and with this conference. If I say something that is too basic, forgive me. First of all, accessibility means making everyone welcome at every touch point. For us at the aquarium, that means not only on site, but also when we have beach naturalists giving talks, also when we do online programs, also when we reach out to communities. We need to figure out how to make it accessible everywhere. One important thing is that we need to look at it from different perspectives. Intersectionality. I cannot say we're going to have a day where we will welcome the Native American community, and another day for the community that is deaf, and another day for the community that uses a wheelchair, because many people may be part of several of those communities at the same time. So sometimes American Sign Language may not work if you come from a country where that is not used, right? Also, the degree of disability. The majority of people that have trouble seeing are not completely blind. The majority of people that have trouble hearing are not completely deaf. So how do you incorporate them? And how do they think of themselves? Many people lose their hearing, for example, later in life. They may not think of themselves as deaf. They may not want to learn ASL. They may lose their sight in their 70s and not want to learn Braille at that point. So we need to take that into account. Their experience and their self-image are very different from somebody who has a condition from birth. And the other thing is, what are their preferences, right? Some people may prefer closed captioning. Some people may prefer ASL. Some accessible solutions may benefit everyone. Many people watch TV with closed captioning on. They may have good hearing, they may speak English, but they still prefer to read. And so closed captioning is not only a solution for people that cannot hear, it may be a solution for everyone. So those were some of the very, very basic things that I learned. And then I started learning about how to get started. And a lot of this very important information came from Elizabeth. First, you have to identify barriers. Do a walkthrough of your space. Think about it from different perspectives. Talk to your vendors, talk to your donors, talk to your employees and volunteers. How about your board of directors? Many directors are older and they may be facing some of these disability issues for the first time. We need to remember that we are all temporarily abled, right? So even if we think I am not disabled, I may be skiing tonight and break a leg and have to use a wheelchair. So I will see the world and the aquarium from a different perspective. Reach out to the community. Don't do things for the community, do things with the community. Introduce an access framework, a basic framework of how to make your space accessible, and establish a multi-departmental advisory group, and also including those community members. Work on your plan and be creative. Maybe your solutions will be different from other solutions. Next. Okay, there were some really interesting specifics for me as a marketer. We do a lot of writing and a lot of design. Typography, layout, and colors are very important. I had always thought that dark colors on a white background are better. But it turns out that sometimes on screens, the opposite is true. It may be better for print, not necessarily for screens. Luckily today, there are many apps and software that helps you run your website through them and then establish how to make it even more accessible. One of the panelists I talked to suggested the Agile model. If you're not familiar with the Agile model, it is a model that was developed for software development. And basically it means that everyone involved in a project gets together very frequently, maybe every day, just for 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe the meeting is just a standing meeting because you don't even need to sit down. The idea is share where you are and see if anything changed. Because if you don't do that, you may be working following a plan that was created early on, but your perception may have changed and you may need to include modifications to that plan. So it is an excellent model. See, listen, feel, involve, use all your senses to involve everyone. And finally, you cannot do everything, but it is important to apply redundancy. What does this mean? Like I said before, closed captioning and ASL. Braille, but also audio tours. Just don't think of people who are disabled or who have a disability in terms of one size fits all. We are all different. We all have different wants and needs. And if we truly want to change the world, and I think we do because of the kinds of institutions we work for, we need to bring everyone with us. So that was my biggest learning, and it has been a pleasure to share that with you. And now I would like to introduce you to Alexander Jones from Woodland Park Zoo. Take it away, Alexander.
Hello all, Alexander Jones, he, him pronouns. I'm a white male with yellow rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a collared shirt, and behind me is a tapir from the Woodland Park Zoo, a very cute little animal that I'd like to share with everyone. So I just wanted to essentially share, I guess also I am the accessibility specialist at Woodland Park Zoo, and I work on all things accessibility. So I recently was able to attend the AZA conference, and for those that are not aware of what AZA is, it's the Association for Zoos and Aquariums. It's our annual conference where everyone gets together, and we met this year in Baltimore. And this year there were a number of topics specifically related to DEAI. And one of the topics that I was fortunate enough to get to present on was from the lens of sensory considerations. And those were a number of different elements that got included into that. And so I'm going to go into a little bit about what we talked about from the sensory perspective of accessibility. Next slide, please. And so we had a panel, a number of individuals that presented on a different range of topics on sensory inclusion. And those ranges from what sensory inclusion looked like from both an infrastructure perspective, from a employee, so those with neurodivergence and how they interacted with spaces and interacted with employees at their zoo or aquarium, how certain zoos or aquariums were actually implementing sensory inclusion. And so some of the learnings that we really talked about was how do we design a welcoming space by creating inclusive infrastructure? And that is kind of going back to Moira's point about creating redundancy in in your space. So having multiple forms of content shared from a universal perspective. So whether it's providing audio captioning, audio and visual representations of the material that you're trying to present on, having tools and implements that folks can interact with in many, many ways that all get to the same learning goals and learning outcomes. Another big key takeaway from our sensory inclusion was really listening and working with the community. As Moira also presented at AZA, we really talked about creating advisory groups. So those advisory groups, including nonprofits in your region. Here in Seattle, we work really closely with the Arc of King County and different adult learning homes. So just really involving a community on an advisory panel can help you collaborate as you design spaces intended for folks on the neurodivergent spectrum and folks that you want to ultimately include at your space. You want to start with evaluating your existing programs. What can you do that's a quick fix or a quick change, nothing that is going to be a massive infrastructure change. So like besides just looking at creating a sensory room, for example, look at what you can change by like including a sensory map. You already have an existing map, maybe change some elements that that there are quiet spaces, that you can advertise to folks. So think about those things that you already have at your capacity, and advertise those to your advantage and to the advantage of those that would be affected by that. I would say another big key takeaway was amplifying those voices within your organization. There was a really great group of individuals from their respective zoo and aquarium that talked about what it was like, the lived experience of individual with neurodivergence or on the autism spectrum. And so they had a number of key takeaways that I wanted to share with all of you. But one is really being willing to engage in trial and error. Not every accommodation will be the right fit. And then you might take a few tries to find a working solution for an individual. Neurodivergent folks can feel extremely anxious. And if the first thing doesn't work, they might not feel like they're ever going to be afforded another accommodation. So make it really clear that there are options and that you can collaborate with an individual in that process. Also working with neurodivergent folks, take the initiative to start a conversation. Especially if you're a supervisor or a manager, you want to make sure that you're saying, hey, I see that there's a challenge here. You're doing an incredible job at this, but are there ways that we can brainstorm alternatives and kind of help to figure out what your fit here or what we can do to work within this organization? Be prepared to offer reassurance. Seeking accommodations for an individual at a zoo and aquarium or any job that there is a frightening, daunting process, and someone might be insecure if they are having to ask for accommodation. Oftentimes, they've been struggling their whole life, and so making sure that that you're offering those accommodations, but also trying to work collaboratively into trying to find solutions for that. And then really look at the core of their job and what they're doing. See if there are ways that you can adapt those roles. It's no different, like Moira was saying, that that you right now might have a temporary disability, or there might be a temporary disability associated, but the core being neurodivergent is no different than those temporary disabilities. And so you want to make sure that you're really looking to work within those folks and figuring out what best fits for their role. I would say that is really some of the key takeaways as someone from a colleague of mine that is neurodivergent. And so, take that with a grain of salt, and I'm also more willing to share some more thoughts on that as well. I finally say the biggest key takeaway is building something within your strategic plan. So at Woodland Park Zoo, we built accessibility and inclusion within our strategic plan, and it's part of our core values, and it's something that we're striving towards and also measuring on. And it helps you stay honest with your organization as you go on your inclusive accessibility path. So by building it in your strategic plan, you're held accountable. And I would say that was another really big thing to making sure that you are being sensory inclusive from the get-go. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share with everyone a couple of things that we've done also at Woodland Park Zoo. Just in terms of sensory inclusion, like I said, with offering alternative formats, one of the photos here is a representation of one of the signs we have on grounds. It's to the entrance of our Zoomasium space. Not only does it have a detailed amount of when our hours are, but it also says that we have sensory tools available for folks. It has a QR code to provide audio formats of the same information, so that redundancy is built in. So when someone comes to Zoomasium, they have a really good understanding of what they're getting themselves into. The other photo here is from one of our Inclusion Fest days. It's a kind of representation of what we had in terms of multiple formats. You can see a page from a children's book, and it's a book by Justice Sotomayor Be Bold, Be Brave, Be You. And it has not only does it have written language in English, but it also has Braille text that folks can enjoy as well. And it also had an audio format, both in English and in Spanish. Next slide. And now I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Alexander and Maura. Is this getting you excited to come to Boston next year? Thumbs up. I want to see some thumbs up here. Not yet. Okay, well, I will make sure to convince you. I want to take a short pause here to see if there are any questions or comments that you want to come off of mute and ask. There's a lot of information here, and I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to ask any burning questions that might be in your mind. Anyone? No questions yet. Okay, we'll move on. So the lead conference, this was my second lead conference. The first one was in Denver in 2018. And when I went to lead, I was just completely blown away that there were so many people of like mind who were working and passionate about accessibility. And I just learned so much. I felt like my brain was just gonna pop out. And it was just really reaffirming to see all of these professionals, artists, and people with disabilities coming together to learn about lots of different topics. And we all get this really great, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a program with all kinds of sessions there. And the sessions are organized by theme, different theme each year. So my main takeaways were it's important to come from a place of yes and to be creative and to work to problem solve together. Because sometimes you may think, oh no, we can't do something, maybe it's not in the budget, or maybe it's something you've never done before, but you can actually find so many resources out there that will help you get to where you want to be. And I heard this interesting quote: the ones who get sued and lose are the ones who say no. And I personally, I've heard no so many times, and it really doesn't leave a good taste in either person's experience. You know, you want to be able to make things work for someone, even if you can't do it right now. At least you can make an effort to try and explain that you would like to make it happen next time, for example. We talk a lot about ADA compliance, but ADA compliance is pretty basic. There's a lot more that you can do beyond ADA compliance. And that's what we say best practices, even though that term is really overused and it's not a good term to be using anymore for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into. But there's so many other great ways of doing things that are beyond ADA compliance. So, for example, if you have a bench that has to be a certain height, you can go above and beyond by getting lightweight stools that you can move from place to place so that people can sit down while looking at an exhibit if they get tired, for example, and they don't have to walk all the way back to sit on that bench. So going above and beyond is really important. And all visitors have the right to attend and leave a venue experience with their dignity intact. Now, this is pretty straightforward and pretty obvious, but when I heard that, I realized that this is something that is not often stated by organizations or practiced by organizations. I'm really thinking about putting yourself in someone else's shoes as they enter a building. What is that experience going to be like, and how are they going to actually enter those doors with their dignity intact? So, for example, if you don't have a ramp in front of your building, people have to go around to get in. Their dignity is not going to be intact because they can't enter in the same way that everyone else can. I also learned about four models of disability. The ones that I'm most familiar with are the medical and social models. We have the moral model, and the moral model states that, looking at my notes here, because I don't have everything memorized, the moral model states that, where are my notes? They disappeared. Something about disability is a manifestation of evil. So thinking about disability from a moral standpoint was very interesting to me. And then you have the charity model, pity model, and that's a very commonly a common way of looking at people with disabilities. That there's someone to be pitied or helped. And the person with the disability is only seen as a person with a disability, and they need to be helped. Think about Jerry Lewis, telethon, portraying these people as people who need to be helped, through charity. And then the social model, disability is a construct of inaccessible environments. So when you think about the built environment, the environment is disabling for people. Think about education. People go into a classroom, and the classroom is not accessible. There isn't an interpreter for someone with a hearing loss. There isn't a ramp for someone with a wheelchair. So it's the built environment around you that is the one that really was disabling the individual. And then affirmational is disability is a valued lived experience. So there's the term disability justice. Disability is something to be proud of, and there's a lot of movement in that direction, that disability is not something to be ashamed of, and moving away from it being a stigma. I went to a session on assistive listening devices. I'm always interested in this topic, and captioning as well, because I'm always interested in knowing what the latest technology is out there. And I was completely overwhelmed by all these different things that are out there, and it was really, really heartening to see that there's actually some resources that we can use. And so they went through different venues and what kind of technology is used for different places. For example, infrared, FM, loop systems, Wi-Fi systems, and all the different considerations that go into using each one of these systems. I'm a big fan of loop systems because, as a person with hearing loss and using cochlear implants, if I see the loop symbol, which is a blue, it's a blue picture with an ear and a line going through the ear. That means that the room is looped. And so many people with hearing devices don't realize that they can click on the remote control on the T-coil, and boom, the sound will go directly into their hearing device. So they can sit anywhere in an auditorium and be able to hear the speaker. Which is fantastic for audio input. And captioning, same thing. There's so many different types of ways of captioning different situations, whether it's outdoor festivals or indoors in theaters and museums. And it was great to see all the different ways that you can get something captioned. And finally, there was a lot of talk about ableism in the arts and how people with disabilities are the least represented in the performing arts, and the importance of access check-ins. And I've been talking a lot about access check-ins and what that means is it normalizes a meeting, the meeting structure for people with disabilities, because often they are the most marginalized at meetings because they have access needs. Let's take myself for an example. I have a hearing loss. If I'm in a meeting, I'm relying on reading lips, and so I have to speak up and say, my access need is please articulate, please speak slower or face me. But nobody else has to say that, so it leaves me feeling sort of the odd person out. But an access check-in for everyone involved, everyone saying what their access needs are, because even able-bodied people have access needs. For example, I need to have a glass of water. If I have my water, then I'm not dehydrated. Or someone who has lower back problems, I need to stand up and stretch so that I have some mobility. Or someone who has diabetes, they may have to leave and use the insulin pump. On and on and on. And you can simply say, my access needs have been met. And so I want to show this slide that has a picture of a chart that shows the examples of venues, and like airports, casinos, classrooms, etc., etc. And then the types of assistive listening device, induction loop, and FM, Wi-Fi, etc. And so it has a dot for each place that uses which particular technology. And I thought that was really interesting, a very organized way of portraying how the different venues can use different types of technology. And you should all have this in your packet that I emailed. So we have given a lot of information, and one last thing I want to say is that I gave a presentation. You can give presentations at LEAD. You can submit a proposal for a presentation, and the presentation I gave was with another colleague in Minnesota about access plans and the different kinds of access plans that you can use, and how that can feed into your strategic planning. So you can do an audit of your space, and then you can create an access plan with goals in terms of what you want to accomplish for the next year. And it helps keep you accountable and helps keep you making small steps, because that's all it takes is small steps forward. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to move forward. Just keep talking about it and keep trying new things. So I'll stop there, and I want to ask you what intrigues you about our conversation here, what motivates you to start working on a new organization, and what questions do you have? Now's the time to ask us questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other. No, don't be shy. Please ask any kind of question. There's no question too large or too small to ask.
I should say you can also put your question in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud.
Alexander and Laura, I have a question for each of you for your conferences. What was something that, what was the one thing that surprised you, or the one thing that makes you want to take back to your organization and start working on right now?
For me,
I mean, go ahead, Moira. So.
Oh, okay. So for me, one thing that was great, there were several people at the conference who were disabled. There were a lot of guide dogs, service dogs. There were people with white canes, and I had some wonderful conversations with them. So I had conversations I had never had with anybody else, and they were very open and eager to share their experiences and how they viewed the accessibility they could enjoy in different places, and what they wished other places would do better. So that was, for me, the most wonderful part of the conference, was to be able to talk to all of them.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, and I mentioned this earlier, but it was really cool to see. I had not had an opportunity to attend AZA in person before, and I had gone to the virtual conference last year. And so interacting with colleagues at the AZA conference and just seeing the change from the conversation the year prior, there wasn't as much conversation around DEAI. And so just to be interacting with folks and talking about these, conversations, I felt so much more inspired coming back to Woodland Park Zoo, and now having connections with other folks in the neurodivergent community from those institutions. I'm already planning on, what kind of topics can we present at the next AZA conference? But I do think there was less conversations around just exclusively accessibility at AZA. And I would love to see that increase next time. So I would say I see a lot of folks here in the session here, just from institutions that I know very much about. So if you're starting your journey, I would love to talk to you about what kind of things you're going to start implementing in terms of accessibility, and is that something we could present at next year at AZA to increase that conversation for other zoos and aquariums, leading in Seattle as representatives for changing inclusion and accessibility. So a lot of opportunity.
I wanted to add something else. This is a detail, but it crystallized when I was at LEAD. So we are an aquarium, and people come and see our animals, listen to talks from our aquarists about the animals, and that's really the experience. We have some photography on the walls, but what I think need more of is tactiles. So several of the talks at LEAD were about the experience of tactiles. And one thing I learned is it's not only for people who are blind or who have trouble hearing, it also helps people who are neurodivergent. It also helps people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. And it helps everyone, right? We all we see these amazing fish or the octopus, and we wonder what it would be like to touch them, right? So I did also attend AZA, although I was more in the marketing talks. And for example, there was a booth that they sell models of different animals. But one thing they do that I thought was very interesting, they can make these squares that you can touch, and they simulate the skin of different animals. So you can order those, and then and I think everybody would love to do that, right? So it's one of those things that you can say, oh, this will improve the experience for people who are blind. No, it will improve the experience to everyone. We see these animals, we would love to see what they feel like. So tactiles is something I definitely want to include as part of the aquarium experience.
And Moira, to your point too, I would say it's from that universal perspective. Is we're often talking here about accessibility and different disabilities, but I would say from approaching it from that universal perspective. At Woodland Park Zoo, we say we're going to create immersive experiences for all of our guests and our staff. And our volunteers. And when you're thinking about those immersive experiences, like tactile, sensory experiences, those are what immersive experiences. How can I feel like I'm in this biome? How can I feel like I'm, really engaging with these animals that we have the benefit of having on grounds or in the aquarium. So I think if you look at it from that, like, what is an immersive experience? And what are we trying to achieve for all of our guests from that universal perspective? Like, yeah, tactile just makes sense, you know,
Yeah.
for many experiences. So, and I think there's a hand from someone as well.
Yes, Bean.
I just put it in the chat, but one thing that really struck me earlier was talking about inclusivity versus belong. So it's one thing to build all these great ramps, for example, a wheelchair user, but how do the wheelchair users in the public come to believe that this is a place that I can go and really get the experience? So it's one thing to implement like closed loop, but how is it conveyed to people with hearing loss that this is a place that you really belong and you can get an entire experience? And I'm really interested to how people are doing that.
I mean, Elizabeth, I'll let you speak to that too. But I think what I've come to, and I think from my own role at Woodland Park Zoo, is we need to do a better job. But I think representation is a big thing. So if your, say, staff represents those that you are trying to attract, I don't want to say attract, but those, you want to be represented by the population that are just the general population, right? And so if you are providing ADA ramps, you should also have staff that use ADA ramps. You have to have equal representation of the folks that you want to attract to the zoo or the aquarium or whatever institution you're talking about. So I think, and that goes along the same lines as, you know, including folks from the neurodivergent community. Just anyone, you have to have that equal representation from both your volunteers. So we have our volunteer inclusion program, which we try to have equal access. So that's what my first start, I would say, is what I'm trying to improve upon at Woodland Park Zoo. But.
Thank you, Alexander. There's a question from Amy in the chat. I struggle to find accessible summer childcare and activities for my also deaf child, especially during a pandemic. A friend recommended reaching out to upper-level managers at museums and aquariums as more likely to provide accommodations, in quotes, than other venues and sectors. Can you describe a bit about how to best approach these spaces with access requests? And how does it differ from casinos, houses of worship, friend theaters, etc.? That's a great question. Anything from Maura or Alexander?
So, like I said, it's a journey, right? And we are probably at the very start of the journey. If you go to the Seattle Aquarium website, you will see that people can contact us in advance to their visit. So the way our ticketing system works now is we encourage people to plan their visit in advance, and everybody gets better prices if they plan their visit in advance. So when you're planning that visit, you can request special accommodations if needed. In our case, if you use a wheelchair, for example, you don't need to go in a different way because the ramps are what everybody uses. You can also, if you have children who are neurodivergent, you can ask for a bag of tactiles. You can also ask for headsets for people that are triggered by loud noises. You can ask for interpreters that know ASL. So some of our volunteers know ASL, but if we don't know you're coming, there may not be one that knows ASL when you come in. We want to increase the number of employees and volunteers who know ASL, but in the meantime, you can certainly request that. And so we will do our best to accommodate these kinds of requests. What else? Of course, we accommodate service dogs. So all that information is on our website. It's just a start, but we do try to be as accommodating as possible.
I would also follow up too, Amy, in terms of specifically for childcare activities for your child. At Woodland Park Zoo, and I don't know, there are other organizations that offer this too, is if you are signing up your child, we have reserved a special budget. So there, if you're asking for accommodations, you can ask for accommodations for your child at, say, a summer camp. Like, we have a number of summer camps that run throughout the entire summer, and we'll provide an ASL interpreter if we know it in advance. That's something that your child would like to have. So we've set aside accommodations just as long as we know about it. And I would say not to like say is like you have to go to an upper level manager. We have those things in place for requests. It just requires a little bit of timing on understanding what the need is, and then we can provide that accommodation. And I would say it differs from casinos and houses of worship is that I would say zoos and aquariums, we really want to offer like these unique experiences for every guest. And at times, like I think Elizabeth or Moira mentioned at LEAD, is that sometimes I would say these other institutions are probably looking more from an ADA compliance, whereas I think the museums and cultural spaces are really trying to go above and beyond. And so that's why I say is like, shoot us an email at a contact us page, because I think a lot of us that are going through this journey want to know about these accommodations and want to like work with our guests to make those accommodations happen.
I wanted to add something. Amy, I feel your pain. I think the issue is that there is no one person at the organization who can handle the accommodation request. And if you don't have that one person, excuse me, it's going to be difficult for anyone like yourself to get accommodations because they don't know what they offer. And so trying to get organizations to understand that they have to really spell out on their website who to go to ask those questions, and really make sure that whoever you have in place knows the answer or knows where to find that answer, because that's really critically important. I've been there, and it's been very frustrating to find someone who knows whether or not that summer camp, for example. I have two kids with hearing loss as well, so when they were younger, I had to ask and do a lot of research and find out who is the person to go to ask about accommodations. And I see that Rachel has their hand up.
Hi, everyone. I am at the Pacific Science Center. I'm the animal care supervisor here, and we're currently working on a project. I'll keep this really brief, but our tide pool here, it's a touch tank of the Puget Sound tide pool. It was built in the 80s. It's not accessible by wheelchairs. So we are currently working on an accessible tide pool addition, since at this time we don't have the financial ability to redo the entire exhibit. And so we're in version 1. It's extremely new. And I just wanted to see if I could get resources or advice on how to set up an advisory group and go about looking for resources in order to help get this version up and running and be successful.
I mean, I could talk a little bit about our advisory group. You can reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, but really it's just making those connections with local organizations. We have some fantastic organizations here in Seattle, as I mentioned before, but one I'm going to continually tout is the ARC of King County. They're fantastic. They do work with more specified communities, mostly around neurodivergent folks. But they also do work with a very broad set of individuals. So looking for those organizations that would help affect the changes that you want to make. There's another one, there's the Seattle Universal Design Council is a great connection to have. They're looking at how to create universal access, mostly around architecture and infrastructure. So that might be another area that you want to look into. and just getting connected with the right folks. But yeah, creating that community and then really listening to their feedback. You want to look at a collaborative model, not just be like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We want to just make these changes. Really listen to what the feedback of, say, your patrons. So who are your guests and who are the guests with disabilities that you're trying to include, and create that around your advisory council, and have those people affect the change that you want to make at the Pacific Science Center.
And I would also add that if you create an advisory council, be very, very specific about what you want from them, and be sure to compensate people for their time. The worst thing is for people to show up and they're not sure what's expected of them. But I echo everything that Alexander has said. So thank you for that question. We have
could I add one more thing? And I'm only now starting to explore this, but there is an organization called the Northwest Universal Design Council that has different activities, and basically universal design is all aspects of the built environment, right? And not only for people in wheelchairs or so on, but even for like people who are left-handed, right? Sometimes we forget that. And it's sustainable, accessible, flexible. So I would suggest you go to environmentforall.org, and you can find out about the activities of the Northwest Universal Design Council.
Well, I wish we had more time to answer more questions and have more of a discussion, but I want to thank you all for spending time with us this hour. We would love to have your feedback because we're always seeking to improve. So we're going to put a survey form in the chat. Please take a few minutes to fill that out. And follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you have our website, www.seattlecac.org. We're looking for sponsorships for 2023, so please contact seattlecac@gmail.com for more details. And finally, donations help us sustain this effort. So anything you can contribute would be fantastic so that we can keep putting on programs like this and supporting our arts and cultural community in finding resources and information to improve accessibility for all. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.